The black waitress had spent years working double shifts at a small diner, earning just enough to get by. But she never let exhaustion dull her kindness. So when she saw a frail boy in a wheelchair shivering in the rain outside, she didn't hesitate. She brought him inside, gave him food, and made him feel safe across the street. A billionaire was watching their every move. That billionaire was the boy's father, and her simple act of kindness was about to open doors she never imagined possible. The rain came down in relentless sheets, drumming against the pavement of Lexington Avenue, turning the cracked sidewalk into a slick, uneven mess. Street lights flickered their dim glow, barely illuminating the worn-down buildings that lined the street. It was late past 11, and the diner was supposed to be closing, but Serena Carter had never been the type to turn someone away. Not when they needed help, not when the world had already done enough to kick them down. She was WI down the counter, her chestnut-brown skin damp with sweat after a grueling 12-hour shift, when she noticed the small figure outside, a boy hunched over in a battered wheelchair, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, a tattered coat barely shielding him from the cold. He was sitting just beyond the neon Lexington Diner sign, hands gripping a frayed blanket that did nothing against the chill. Serena frowned, setting her rag down. She pushed open the diner door, shivering as the wind hit her. Hey, sweetie," she called gently, crouching beside him. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The boy flinched at first, then looked up, his blue eyes wide, uncertain, searching. "I'm waiting for my dad," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the rain. Serena glanced up and down the street. No one, just the dim glow of a pawnshop's cash for gold sign flickering across the road, the sound of tires hissing against wet asphalt. "Where is he?" she pressed concern, creeping into her voice. The boy shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter around himself. Serena exhaled, biting her lip. She'd seen too many nights like this. Too many kids left, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. "Well, you can't stay out here, not in this mess." She offered a warm smile. "Come inside with me." "Okay, it's warm, and I've got something special for you." The boy hesitated for a second, but then slowly he nodded. Serena gently took hold of the wheelchair's handles and pushed him inside the dining, the warmth hitting them immediately, the scent of buttered toast and burnt coffee wrapping around them like a blanket. She led him to a booth near the radiator, draping a fresh towel over his shoulders before crouching to meet his eyes. "I'm Serena," she said, flashing another grin. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy sniffed, his fingers curling around the edge of the blanket. Daniel. Serena nodded approvingly. "That's a strong name. You hungry?" He nodded hesitantly. Serena didn't wait for him to say more. She was already moving toward the kitchen, pulling out a fresh loaf of sourdough, slicing it with practiced ease. A few minutes later, she set a steaming plate in front of him, grilled cheese, golden and crisp, with a bowl of tomato soup on the side. Her go-to comfort meal, the one her grandmother used to make when the nights were too long and the world felt too cruel. "This one's on me," she said, tucking a napkin into his lap. Daniel's blue eyes widened as he took his first bite, the cheese stretching in long, gooey strings. "This is the best thing I've ever had," he murmured, his voice laced with something close to wonder. Serena chuckled, watching as he devoured the sandwich. "Good food makes everything better," she said lightly. But inside she felt the familiar ache, the one that came when she saw someone so young, so small, already carrying the weight of the world. What she didn't know was that someone was watching across the street. A sleek black Bentley sat idle in the shadows, its tinted windows reflecting the diner's neon glow. Inside, Raymond Holt sat in silence, his sharp gray eyes locked onto the scene unfolding before him. At 46, Raymond was a man who had built his empire on control, precision, ruthlessness. Holt. Dynamics was the beating heart of Baltimore's tech industry, a billion dual machine that ran on efficiency, not sentiment. And Raymond, its CEO, had spent years in ensuring that nothing, no person, no emotion, no weakness, could interfere with that. Yet here he was, watching, listening, thinking. Daniel was his son, and that woman, that black waitress in a cheap apron in a rundown diner, was feeding his son for free. Raymond's jaw tightened. He had been delayed on a call, an emergency with his investors in Japan, and had told Daniel to wait by the diner. For just a few minutes, he hadn't expected this. He reached for his phone, dialing quickly. "Nora," he said when his assistant picked up, "get down to Lexington Diner. No suits, no heels. I need you there in 20 minutes. There was a pause, so Raymond's grip on the phone tightened. "Find out everything you can about the woman who just fed my son." Then he hung up inside the diner. Daniel was laughing for the first time, all night swinging his legs under the table, soup stains on his chin. Serena wiped it away with a napkin, shaking her head. "Messy eater, huh?" Across the street, Raymond watched his expression, unreadable, his mind already working, already calculating, because he didn't believe in kindness. He believed in debts, and whether she realized it or not. Serena Carter had just put him in hers. Serena wiped her hands on her apron, glancing toward the diner window as the rain kept falling, streaking down the glass in uneven trails. Daniel was finishing the last bite of his sandwich, his fingers warm now, no longer trembling. His face had lost that weary tightness, that guarded look that kids his age shouldn't have to wear. She felt a small swell of satisfaction. One more person, one more moment of kindness, that was enough for her. Then the door swung open. The cold air rushed in, first followed by a woman in jeans and a hoodie, blonde hair tucked beneath a faded oar's cap. She was out of place in the diner, not because of what she wore, but because of the way she carried herself, sharp, calculated, assessing everything in a single glance. Serena had worked in this business long enough to recognize someone who wasn't here for the coffee. The woman's gaze landed on Daniel immediately. She softened her expression, crouching beside the boy. "Hey, champ, time to go," she said lightly, though something about her tone was off, too smooth, too rehearsed. Daniel frowned, wiping his mouth with the napkin Serena had given him. "But I haven't finished my milk." The woman, Nora, though Serena didn't know her name yet, tilted her head with a practiced smile. "You can take it with you. Your ride's waiting." Serena's instincts flared. She had seen too many people dismissed, erased, shuffled off, without a second thought. Too many moments where someone like her wasn't expected to ask questions, but she always did. She folded her arms, studying the woman carefully. "You know him." The woman's smile didn't falter, but her posture shifted, a subtle tightening of the shoulders, the barest flicker of hesitation. "Yeah," she said smoothly, "I'm his Aunt Serena." Didn't blink. She turned to Daniel, that true sweetheart. Daniel hesitated, just a second too long. Nora's jaw tightened. Serena had grown up in a world where hesitation could mean everything she knew. What fear looked like, what power could do, when it moved in silence. She also knew that this woman wasn't Daniel's aunt. She crouched beside him, meeting his uncertain eyes. "You good, baby?" she asked, voice softer now, like a shield. "You want to go with her?" Daniel looked between them, his fingers clenched, the napkin, tiny knuckles going white. "Check here for my dad," he mumbled. "I guess I have to." Serena didn't move. Her gut screamed at her to push further, to demand more, to make sure this kid was actually safe. But she had been here before, a black woman pressing too hard, asking too many questions, getting the wrong kind of attention. Still, she wouldn't send him away empty-handed. She walked to the counter, grabbed a chocolate chip cookie wrapped in wax paper, and slid it into Daniel's hand. "For the road." She said, his small fingers curled around it, and for the first time that night he grinned. "Thanks, Serena. You're the best." Serena forced a smile, but something in her chest pulled tight. She watched as Nora wheeled Daniel toward the door, the quiet tension between them thick enough to cut. Then, just before stepping out into the rain, Nora glanced back. She didn't say anything, she just looked, and Serena recognized it for what it was, a warning across the street. The Bentley's headlights flashed as Nora approached. The rear door swung open before she could knock, and Raymond stepped out. His broad figure framed by the glow of the diner's neon sign, The moment Daniel was safely inside, buckled in the back seat, Raymond turned to Nora. "Well," Nora exhaled, pushing back her hood. "She's sharp," she admitted. "Didn't buy the ant story. Almost called me out on it." Raymond's expression didn't change, but she let him go. "She didn't have a choice," Nora said pointedly. "You know how it is. A black woman making a scene, she would have been the one in trouble, not me." Raymond's jaw twitched, but he said nothing. Nora folded her arms. "She's not like the others." Raymond already knew that he had seen. At the moment Serena stepped into the rain, without hesitation, the way she had spoken to Daniel, like he mattered not. Like he was an inconvenience, he had watched people bend, flatter, manipulate for his money, but she hadn't even known it was his son, and she had helped anyway. That made her dangerous. He opened the car door, sliding inside, his voice low. "I want everything on her name, address, background." He fastened his seatbelt, staring straight ahead. "I want it on my desk by morning." Nora hesitated just a beat too long. "Sir?" "By morning," she exhaled, then nodded. Understood. The Bentley pulled away from the curb, the diner growing smaller in the rearview mirror. But Raymond wasn't thinking about the city lights or the traffic ahead. He was thinking about Serena Carter and the debt he owed her. Serena trudged home that night, her sneakers soaked from the rain, the chill settling deep into her bones. The diner's measly tips weighed lightly in her pocket, barely enough to cover rent, let alone groceries. But the memory of Daniel Grin stayed with her. Still something about the encounter gwed at her, that unease creeping beneath her skin. She had seen it before, that forced polished smile on the woman's face, the way Daniel hesitated before answering. That wasn't just any stranger picking up a kid, that was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She climbed the stairs to her one-bedroom apartment on West Fayette Street, where the heat barely worked, and the walls were thin enough to hear her neighbors' TV blab breed doors. Down the second she shut the door behind her, she leaned against it, rubbing a hand down her face. She had learned a long time ago not to get involved in things that weren't her business. But this felt different. This felt wrong before she could shake the feeling. A knock sounded at the door. Serena stiffened. No one came by at this hour. She peered through the peephole, and her stomach flipped. A man stood on the other side, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive black coat that looked like it cost more than her entire rent. His face was sharp, his gray eyes cold and assessing, like he had already taken her apart in his mind, before she even opened the door. She didn't open it. "Who is it?" Pause, then a voice deep, controlled, too controlled. "Raymond Holt." That name meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her hand on the lock. Another pause to talk. Serena's gut screamed, "Hell, no." But curiosity won out slowly. She unlatched the door and opened it, just enough to see his face clearly. He didn't belong in this building, in this part of the city, in her world. "I don't know you," she said flatly. His expression didn't change. "No, but, my son Serena's pulse skipped." She studied him carefully, now the way his presence filled the tiny doorway, the way his coat was still damp from the rain but his shoes were spotless. This was money power, the kind that could break people without ever lifting a hand. Her grip tightened on the doorframe. "Daniel," she said slowly, "you're his father." His nod was barely perceptible. "I was across the street last night." The chill that had settled in her bones turned sharp. "You were watching." "I was." Serena exhaled through her nose. "So what? You here to complain that I fed your kid, no?" Raymond's gaze flickered, unreadable. "I'm here because I don't believe in charity, but I do believe in paying debts." And then, without waiting for her response, he pulled an envelope from his coat, and placed it on her rickety kitchen table. Serena didn't move slowly. She glanced at the envelope, thick, expensive, the kind of paper that had weight, the kind of paper that meant whatever was inside wasn't small. She swallowed. "What is that? A job offer?" Serena's brain stalled. She blinked up at him. "Oh, what?" Raymond tilted his head slightly as if gagging how much patience he was willing to. "Grant her a job at HT Dynamics, 6 figures, benefits." The works. Serena let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. You think I want to work for some rich white man who thinks handing out a check makes us even? Raymond didn't flinch. I don't think you want charity, Serena. That's why I'm not offering it. Her name in his mouth made something tighten in her chest. She folded her arms. You don't even know me. I know enough. His voice was steady, unshakable, like a man who never asked. Only decided, I know. You gave my son food without expecting anything in return. I know you didn't treat him like an inconvenience. I know that's rare. Serena swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way his words knocked something loose in her ribs. She looked back at the envelope at the ridiculous weight of it, sitting on her table. And what exactly would I be doing at H Dynamics making coffee? Raymond's mouth twitched, something like amusement geeing across his face before it vanished. No, you'd be working directly with me, handling negotiations, public relations. You're good with people. I need someone like that. Serena snorted. You don't need me. You've got a company full of Ivy League grads who'd slit each other's throats for a job like that. Raymond's expression finally shifted, just slightly. That's exactly why I don't trust them. Silence stretched between them, heavy waiting. Serena could feel the weight of his offer pressing against her, curling around the edges of her. Pride, her exhaustion, her stubborn refusal to be bought. But 6 figures, meant no more late rent, no more living paycheck to paycheck, no more nights wondering how she'd stretch her last $20. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Never owe these people anything. Baby, you know they don't give without taking her jaw clenched. Why me? Raymond held her gaze, and for the first time, something in his eyes flickered. Because you saw my son, he said, voice lower now, like it almost cost him. Something to say. Not my money, not my name. You saw him. Serena's throat tightened. She looked at the envelope one last time, then slowly she picked it up. I'll think about it, she murmured. Raymond studied her for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. Good. And then, without another word, he turned and left. Serena stood there long after the door shut, the weight of the envelope in her hands feeling heavier than it should, because she already knew she wasn't just thinking about it, she was going to say yes. The first day at Hall Dynamics felt like stepping into another world, a world where everything gleamed too bright, where money smelled like freshly polished marble, and the air was thick with power. Serena walked into the towering glass building in a department store blazer and thrifted heels, feeling every pair of eyes snap toward her the moment she crossed the lobby. It wasn't the kind of attention she was used to. It wasn't curiosity. It was evaluation, calculation, judgment. She kept her head high, shoulders squared. She had worked in places where people underestimated her before she knew how to hold her ground. Raymond was waiting in his office, a sprawling, sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a desk so pristine it looked more like an art piece than something actually used for work. He didn't look up when she walked in, just gestured toward the chair across from him. You're late. Serena arched a brow, sitting by. 2 minutes, Raymond finally looked at, her gray eyes sharp. That's 2 minutes. I don't get back. Serena exhaled, shaking her head. She had barely been here 5 seconds, and he was already starting. Look, you want me here, or not? Leaned back, studying her, that remains to be seen, before she could fire back. The glass door opened, and Nora walked in, a tablet in hand, her expression unreadable. Serena didn't miss the way the woman's gaze flickered over her like she was assessing whether or not she belonged here. Spoiler alert. She had already decided she didn't miss Carter. Nora said smoothly, Welcome to Holt Dynamics. Serena met her gaze head-on, a slow smile curling her lips. Oh, we're doing last names all right. Good to see you again, MZ Winters. Something? In Nora's eyes flickered just for a second before she turned her attention back to Raymond. I've prepared the reports for the upcoming negotiations with the Orion Group. She handed him the tablet, barely sparing Serena. Another glance. Would you like me to brief her on company protocols? Raymond didn't even look up. No, I will. Serena wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a war morning. Nora only nodded, but before she left, she hesitated just slightly at the door, glancing back at Serena once more. Good luck, she murmured. Serena tilted her head the way she said it didn't sound like encouragement. It sounded like a warning. She didn't have much time to think about it before Raymond was already diving into work. No small talk, no settling in. He pulled up a file, sliding it across the table. Orion Group, he said, they want to push through a contract that would cut labor costs by outsourcing jobs overseas. That means layoffs, thousands. Serena skimmed the file, her stomach turning. And you want me to? What convinced them not to? Raymond's gaze didn't waver. I want you to do what you do best, our people. Serena sat back, crossing her arms. So let me get this straight. You brought me in because you think I can charm my into getting these billionaires to grow a conscience. Raymond didn't blink. No, I brought you in because I think you understand something they don't. Serena narrowed her eyes. And what's that? He leaned forward slightly. That people who have nothing to lose fight the hardest. The words hit something deep in her ribs, something unspoken but true. She stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled, shaking her head. You know you talk in riddles a lot for someone who runs a tech empire. For the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. And then, just like that, the moment passed, meetings at noon, he said, standing, try not to be late. Serena rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. She had a job to do. The conference room was colder than the rest of the building, all steel and glass, like it had been designed to make people uncomfortable. Serena sat beside Raymond at the long mahogany table, facing three men in tailored suits, each one radiating the kind of confidence that came from knowing they could buy and sell entire lives with a single stroke of a pen. The leader of the group, Philip Langford, 60, white hair slicked back. Like old money, arrogance was a birthright. Barely even looked at her. Serena had dealt with men like him before, the ones who only saw value in people who looked like them. She didn't let it show. Raymond opened the conversation, cutting straight to the point. You want to move production to Taiwan? You say it'll save costs? Increase efficiency? He paused. I say it'll destroy a workforce that's built this company's infrastructure for over a decade. Langford gave a slow, thin-lipped smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. You misunderstand, Raymond. It's not personal, it's just business. Serena's fingers curled beneath the table. Not personal. She had heard that phrase too many times in her life when her landlord raised rent overnight because developers wanted to revitalize the neighborhood, when her mother lost her job at the textile plant because they found cheaper labor overseas, when companies like this shut down communities and called it strategy. She smiled, but there was steel in it. Funny, she said, tilting her head, because it's always just business until it's your job on the line. Langford's eyes snapped to her. For the first time, Raymond didn't interrupt. He just watched. Langford exhaled sharply through his nose, like he had better things to do than entertain the help. And you are. Serena. Didn't blink. Serena. Carter Holt. Dynamics. He gave her a once-over, and she saw the exact moment he dismissed her. She didn't care. She had been underestimated before Langford leaned back in his chair, waving a hand. Look, sweetheart, I get it. You think we're the villains here, but this is about numbers. It's about what makes the most sense. Sweetheart. Serena's jaw locked. She leaned forward, matching his posture. All right, she said. Coolly, Leighton talk. Numbers. She slid a document across the table. This is a breakdown of what happens when you offshore production. Sure, you cut costs at first, but in 3 years, when labor demands rise, your new manufacturing hub gets expensive. You'll spend millions restructuring, rehiring, and dealing with PR disasters. When the headlines read, American workers betrayed for profit, she tapped the paper. That's not a guess, that's market analysis. Langford glanced at the file but didn't touch it. Serena held his gaze, didn't blink, didn't flinch. "You can make the smart choice now," she said, voice calm, deadly. "Or you can explain to your investors why your short-term gains just cost them their long-term returns." Silence. Then finally Langford exhaled, picked up the paper, scanned it. Raymond didn't smile, but Serena could feel the shift in the room. She had just changed the game. Langford set the document down, his expression unreadable. "We'll revisit the proposal." Raymond nodded. "See that you do." The meeting ended shortly after. As Langford and his associates left, Serena felt the weight of Raymond's gaze on her. She turned to him. "Well," Raymond studied her for a long moment, then said, "I knew I hired you for a reason." Serena smirked. "Damn right you did." And for the first time since she walked into Holt Dynamics, she felt like she belonged 2 months in. Serena had found her rhythm at Holt Dynamics, or at least she thought she had. She had learned how to navigate the halls of power, how to stand her ground in a world that barely acknowledged her existence. She had faced down Philip Langford and walked out victorious. She had proved to Raymond and to herself that she wasn't just here as a symbolic gesture, a corporate pet project. She was here because she belonged, but victories at the top were short-lived, because now the company was in trouble. Serena was in trouble, and someone had just set her up to take the fall. She had just come back from a client meeting when Nora caught her in the hallway. "We have a problem," she said, her tone sharp, urgent. Serena frowned. "Define problem." Nora didn't answer. She just handed Serena a printed email. Serena's stomach sank. The second she saw the contents, it was a company report, classified financial data. It had been leaked to the press, and the email forwarding. It had Serena's name on it. The words blurred the air in the room, shifted, turned dense, heavy. She forced herself to breathe. "This isn't mine," I know, Nora said, "but someone wants it to be." Serena's pulse thrummed in her ears. She had been in enough situations like this to know how fast they spiraled. A black woman in a powerful white space didn't get the benefit of the doubt. She didn't get to be innocent until proven guilty. She was guilty. The second they said she was, she gripped the paper, scanning it again. "Who else has seen this?" Raymond, Nora said. "And the board." Her breath hitched the board. She had barely clawed her way into this company, and now they were about to rip her out. Raymond's office was colder than usual, or maybe it was just the way he was looking at her. His hands were clasped on his desk. His expression unreadable, but his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, were studying her, weighing her. Serena felt something clench in her chest. "Tell me I wasn't wrong," he said. Low controlled, Serena slammed the email onto his desk. "This isn't me." Rayon didn't look at the paper. He didn't need to. I want to believe that he said, voice steady, "But this is a serious leak. Serena, millions in exposure, stock drops, investigations. You understand how bad this is." Serena leaned forward, hands planted on his desk. "I understand perfectly. I also understand that whoever did this knows exactly what they're doing. I was the easy target, right? The outsider, the black woman with too much confidence. Who's going to believe me over some executive who's been here for 10 years? Raymond didn't flinch, but he didn't disagree either. The silence stretched too long. Serena's nails dug into her palms. "Do you think I did this?" Raymond held her gaze. No. The breath she had been holding finally released, but he continued, "The board does." Serena swore under her breath. Pacing, she could feel the noose tightening. "So, what happens now?" she asked, forcing the words out. Raymond exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "We find the real leak." Serena froze. "We, not you, not me." We, for the first time since she walked in, the ice in her chest cracked. Raymond stood, slipping his suit jacket back on. Nora is already running a trace on the email source, but it was routed through an external server. Someone covered their tracks. Well, he met her gaze. We'll have to be smarter. Serena crossed her arms, leveling him with a look. And what if we don't find them in time? What if the board decides to cut me loose? Raymond's jaw tightened. Then we make them regret it. Serena studied him. Raymond Holt was not the kind of man who made promises, but for the first time she believed him, and whoever had set her up, they were about to find out exactly what kind of fight they had just started. The truth unraveled faster than they expected. Serena and Nora worked through the night, combing through server logs, tracing digital breadcrumbs. Whoever had framed her had been careful, but not careful enough. The leak had been routed through a secondary account, one tied to Eric Calloway, a senior executive with 10 years at Whole Dynamics and a reputation for keeping his hands clean while letting others do his dirty work. By morning, they had enough evidence to bury him. Serena stormed into the boardroom before they could summon her like a criminal. The air was thick with tension, dozens of polished, powerful men in tailored suits staring her down like she was already gone. Raymond sat at the head of the table, unreadable. Miss Carter, one of the board members, an older man with a thin-lipped smirk, gestured to the empty seat across from them. "I assume you know why you're here." Serena didn't sit. She never planned to. "I do," she said, voice steady. "And I assume you all know you're about to make a very expensive mistake." A flicker of amusement crossed Raymond's face, but he didn't interfere. "Miss Carter," the board member started, but she cut him off. "I was an easy target, right?" she said, pacing the new hire. The outsider, the one you could pin this on and sweep under the rug. She stopped placing a thick folder on the table. "Except you picked the wrong one." She slid the folder toward them. Silence stretched as they skimmed the documents, their expressions shifting from dismissive to something closer to alarm. Eric Calloway sat 2 seats down, his face paling by the second. "These are traced emails." Serena continued. "Bank transfers call, logs with reporters. All of them linked to Calloway, not me." She crossed her arms, and before you ask, yes, our legal team already has copies, and so does the press. So if you want to talk about damage control, I'd start there. A murmur swept through the room. Calloway shot to his feet, his voice a little too sharp, too desperate. "This is ridiculous. She's bluffing." Serena turned to Raymond, lifting a brow. "Am I?" Raymond finally spoke, his voice as sharp as cut glass. "No, she's not." The words landed like a blow. Calloway's mouth snapped shut. Raymond stood adjusting his cufflinks. "Effective immediately. Eric Calloway is terminated. Full legal action will be pursued." He let the weight of his words settle before turning his attention to the rest of the room. "And if anyone else in this company thinks they can play the same game, let this serve as a warning." The silence that followed was absolute. Serena didn't smile. She didn't need to. She had won 2 weeks later. She stood beside Raymond at Daniel's graduation. The boy grinned up at her from his wheelchair holding his diploma, like it was the greatest prize in the world. "I told you I'd make it," he said, chest puffed out. Serena laughed, ruffling his hair, never doubted it for a second. Raymond watched them, his usual cool exterior softer. "Somehow, you did good, Carter," he said. She smirked. "Damn right I did." Daniel glanced between them. "Are you guys going to hug or something?" Raymond sighed. "Absolutely not." Serena rolled her eyes. "God, no." Daniel just grinned. For the first time in a long time, Serena felt like she had built something real, something that mattered, and she wasn't done yet, years later. Serena Carter sat in the executive office of Holt Dynamics, her name now engraved on the door as Vice President of Corporate Strategy. What had started as a job, a challenge, had become a mission. Under her leadership, the company expanded its ethical labor initiatives, launched mentorship programs, and built partnerships with minority-owned businesses. Across town, a new community center bore the name Carter Holt Foundation, funding education and job opportunities for underserved youth, and at its ribbon-cutting ceremony, Daniel, now a college freshman, stood beside her grinning, like the kid who once got a free meal in a diner, because kindness, that was the kind of investment that always paid off. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.